on this topic of the now classified emails, which I believe totals, with the addition of 125 yesterday, 288. The simple question I have is, why weren't those emails marked classified at the time they were sent?
Well, a couple points to make there. One is just understanding what our role in this process is, which is that, we're responding to a FOIA request to publicly release these emails. No. Let me finish, and then I'll try to answer your question, I promise. So that's where our attention is focused on, is looking at and then upgrading these before public release, which is a common, frankly, thing. That we look at these, we redact where necessary in light of the fact that they're going to be publicly released. What we've said all along is we have not found anything that was marked classified at the time that it was sent.
Right, but the question is, Mark, shouldn't it have been marked classified? Isn't it true that it was mishandled? Because now you're calling it classified, and not because this is information that has changed over time, that is magically now sensitive that wasn't then. This information was mishandled and should have been marked or should not have been sent through unclassified systems. Is that an inaccurate statement?
No, I reject that because for a couple of reasons. One is it is routine for us to look at this material, again, in light of the fact that via a FOIA process, it is going to be publicly released, that this information is sensitive and we don't want it to be publicly released. So we're going to redact necessary portions. But we're only doing that now, in the sense that we can't go back in time and judge accurately what the conditions were, what the circumstances were of that information at the time it was shared with the secretary, and make a judgment on that.
But
why not?
But wait a minute. But isn't it true?
It's not that easy, Matt.
Isn't it true that when you, Mark Toner,
Yes.
use your unclassified email State Department system, as all these correspondence, all these 125 emails are basically based on unclassified,
Correct.
most of them State Department email systems, isn't it true that you're not supposed to be sending information that could at any point be deemed classified, whether it's the lowest level of confidential or whatever? If you're going to be communicating that way, you're supposed to use alternative secure means. Isn't that true?
I mean, again, and we've talked about this a lot, and without getting into specifics, but information that was shared at the time might years later be considered to be sensitive. And again, looking at it through the prism that we're ultimately going to release it publicly, that does add an element to all of this.
Are you saying that the majority? This is my last question. The
Yeah, sure.
majority of these emails fall under that category of things that were just later deemed sensitive that weren't sensitive at the time, or isn't it true that they're just being classified now because you have to, because you're putting them on the website?
So a couple of things. One is it's very difficult for us, and I said this before, to go back and to judge what the circumstances were at the time this information was shared and to make a judgment on whether that information was classified at the time. It's not a black and white issue. It's not a clear issue. We see nothing at this point in time up till now that would indicate that any of this information was marked classified at the time.
Well, of course, but it would have been impossible to mark it classified at the time.
Not necessarily.
Using an unclassified system, it would have been impossible to properly mark it classified.
But to the second part of your question is our role in this, as we have processed or continue to process this tranche of emails that we've received, we're looking at how this could be perceived now upon public release. And that's been our focus here. How do we process these, and how do we ensure that any sensitive information now is redacted appropriately?
Do you think it's possible, when all is said and done and the FBI has had its look at it and whoever else is investigating this, that it could be determined that staffers within the State Department are actually responsible for mishandling and sharing this information in ways they shouldn't have?
Again, that's not for me to speak to from this podium today. Our role is to process this FOIA request. But you raise a valid point, which is that there are other investigations and reviews underway, and I would encourage you to speak to those entities to ask what they're looking at, but they could well be looking at some of these broader issues.